You'd like to start, Diana?
Thank you, Amy, for the introduction. Yes, and before I begin, I'd like to introduce our co-authors, Michelle Bichot of NatureServe and Christopher Tracy of the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program and Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. Kathy Hafner of the Game Commission, she's the Wildlife Diversity Conservation Planning Coordinator, and I will be co-presenting. I'm the conservation coordinator for the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. And you know, today this conference is actually emblematic of how we're taking advantage of technology, and no less for conservation. When we want to talk today about how we're using technology to advance the Pennsylvania Wildlife Action Plan and the actions in it through the use of the Conservation Opportunity Area tool. And before we get into the presentation, we want to acknowledge those beyond our own agencies and the co-authors' affiliations. We want to acknowledge the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, who provided technical and administrative assistance, as well as our funder, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Wildlife Sport Fish Restoration Program, through the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program. And of course, we want to send our appreciation to the many users who have helped us with the Wildlife Action Plan and the Conservation Opportunity Area tool. So we're often challenged, and here we have a conservation challenge. So how do we determine what and where we can implement conservation actions that are going to have the most benefit for the species and the habitats? We all want to do the right thing, but we often have that question of where can we be the most effective for species and habitat conservation? And then we're also challenged with when is the right time to implement conservation actions. Can we take a proactive approach and try to address a problem before it becomes really bad? Or do we take a reactive approach whenever something has gotten pretty bad? And we know that the most effective, least costly way is to address a problem before it becomes so difficult. And when it comes to conservation of species, this is really important, because by the time a species is seriously at risk of becoming extinct or highly endangered, there are all sorts of other issues, biological issues like genetics, that play a role in their recovery. So it's not just the economics, it's the biological aspect. So what we want to try to do is to address problems before they become serious. And so how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need a plan. And in Pennsylvania, we have a plan. It's the Wildlife Action Plan. And this plan is comprehensive, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, about what's actually in this plan. And it's also science-based. So we used science. We consulted with numerous technical experts in developing this plan. It's also transparent. So we lay out the processes for how we develop this plan. And so you can, because it's science-based and it's transparent, it's repeatable. You can use the processes such as the selection of the species that are in the plan. And importantly, though the plan is administered by the Pennsylvania Game Commission and the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, this plan is everyone's plan. It's for all in Pennsylvania who have interest and want to get involved in conservation of at-risk species. And we provide some examples later on of how you can do that. So we all know from other presentations have already been made this morning that funding is critical. Well, no less for the Pennsylvania Wildlife Action Plan. The primary funder is our federal funds through the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program. And this includes funds for implementing programs that benefit wildlife and their habitats, including species not hunted or fished. And this program is really the nation's core program for preventing species from becoming endangered, because we know that by the time they get endangered, it's much more costly to recover them. So what's in this plan? So when the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program was developed, Congress said, in addition to the money, well, if you have the money, you have to develop a plan. So all states and U.S. territories have what they call a State Wildlife Action Plan. And Congress also identified features of the plan that need to be, that all states have to address. So the first one is we have to identify the species, and these species are called species of greatest conservation need. And again, we have a process for how we identify those. Then we have to identify the habitats that these species use, the extent of the habitat and its condition. Then we have to identify the threats to the species and the habitats. And then we have to identify the actions that we're going to use to ameliorate the threats and benefit the habitats and the species. Next, we have to monitor the effectiveness of our actions, because we all know we want to make sure that the actions that we're going to take are actually resulting in the benefits that we intended. And if they're not, then we need to adapt. Next, we need to document how we're going to revise the plan, because we recognize that conditions change, and Congress requires us to comprehensively review and revise our plan no less than every 10 years. So the plan was, current plan we're on was published in 2015, and so we'll need to have a new plan by 2025. And finally, we know that we can't do this alone. It requires partners and the public to implement this plan. So we're always looking for input from partners and the public and seeking their support. So how many species are in the plan? Through the processes that we've identified, we found that 90 birds, 19 mammals, 65 fishes, 18 amphibians, 22 reptiles, and 450 invertebrates are characterized as species of greatest conservation need. So quite a large number. We got a lot of responsibilities here to try to, try to keep these species from becoming endangered, or if they are, to recover them. So the early question we had was where to implement conservation actions, because really conservation opportunities are tied to place. But one of the difficulties is that habitats aren't equally distributed across the landscape, and neither are the species. So how do we bring this together so we can provide guidance for where conservation actions should be placed, and then what actions would have the most benefit? So we have this action plan, but it's huge. It's 2,100 plus pages, And if you really want to work out, it's 15 pounds if you want to print out the hard copy. So it's quite a document, but we know that in order to efficiently deliver conservation, we need to provide a mechanism that will make it convenient for people who are working on the ground, who are wanting to do good for conservation. So when we were developing this plan, we knew we wanted to take advantage of the technology, just like we are today. And so we developed a user-driven, spatially explicit, web-accessible tool. And we call it the Conservation Opportunity Area tool. And really, conservation opportunities are everywhere. And this tool will allow that to happen. So what are some of the notable features of this tool? Well, first of all, it revolutionizes wildlife action plan delivery. Few other states have a tool like this. It compiles massive amounts of information into a usable format. Nearly 400,000 records, somewhere around 390,000 species records are in this tool. It also enhances the relevancy because you can identify a place where that you're of interest, and we provide conservation actions that would be helpful to the species in that area. And it's dynamic. We regularly update the data in here from multiple sources, including Fish and Boat and Game Commission and eBird and iNaturalist and the Pennsylvania Amphibian Reptile Survey and more. So, so next, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Kathy, and she's going to walk through an example of the COA tool.
Great, thanks, Diana. So you can find this. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. Great. So you can find this tool at wildlifeactionmap.pa.gov. As Diana mentioned, it's free to use. However, you do need to create a new account create an account just like you would with many other free tools out there. And you'll just create a username and password. And this is the homepage, and we'd encourage you to review the homepage when you first visit the tool. There's some good information provided, such as a quick start guide that can really get you on your way to using this Conservation Opportunity Area tool. So in the interest of time, we'll just step through some of the more notable features. Once you log in to the tool, you'll see at the top there's several different tabs you can use. Today we're going to be looking at the map tab, where most of the action happens. And once you click on the map tab and go to the map, you'll see many map layers. And so here, displayed on the left-hand side is just, we couldn't fit it all on the screen. So we've truncated it to display the map layer groups. And you'll see that we have species of greatest conservation need, several conservation planning layers, focal areas that include golden wing warbler focal areas, ruffed grouse, cerulean warbler, and some prioritized tree layers that we've received from either the Game Commission or conservation partners. We also have protected lands and other reference layers such as a habitat map. And what we'll focus on today is creating an area of interest report. Here I have, you'll see some of the expanded layers that you can explore. And given the topic of the conference, we're going to be looking at abandoned mine lands. So here we have the abandoned mine lands layer, and that's activated. And what we're going to do is create an area of interest report. This report is going to create that summary information that Diana mentioned during her presentation, where we're collating the species of greatest conservation need information, habitats that they're associated with, and conservation actions you can take for them in your specific area of interest. So once you click on that button, you'll be taken to this other pop-up window where you can, you'll have to zoom into a certain scale, and 72,224. And you'll be able to either draw your own area of interest freehand. You can actually use a map layer, which is what I'll describe in a moment here, or upload your own shapefile, as long as it's less than 5,500 acres. That's the limit we've set on it. So you'd click to start drawing. Here we've used one of the abandoned mine lands polygon points to create our area of interest. You would accept this, click through those buttons to accept it. And just to back up for a second, once you accept that, there'll be a form to fill out, and it's just for your information with the project name, etc. The project will, you'll get an email when that project is ready, but you can also go to My Projects. This tab is where all of your projects will be contained. It's for your use, and this is what it looks like. So here we have on the bottom of the screen where the project is created. So you click on that link, and it'll bring you to that specific project page. Here you'd be able to edit or view your shape. You don't need to redraw it, which is nice. You can update the report. So for example, if you've drawn an area of interest and maybe you haven't been there in a while, you want to see if any new information is available, you can just simply click Update Report, hit Submit, and it'll generate a new report for you with new information. And this is important because we update this the data in this tool quarterly for any of the threatened and endangered species information, or annually comprehensive update once a year. So here you go to we're going to look at the PDF of the Area of Interest report, and you'll see several features in this report. We've got the map of the project area. You'll find just basic information about an overview of the counties, municipalities, and some of the ecoregions, et cetera, that your project is in. Here we have the species of greatest conservation need summary information. So here this area of interest has 14 species of greatest conservation need, or SGCN, including one sensitive species, which is a Fish and Boat Commission jurisdictional species. We do not display the sensitive species for the public for obvious reasons. So when you look at the species of greatest conservation need information, you'll see the species name, the prioritization of that species in the Wildlife Action Plan. So for example, here wood thrush has a priority score of 1, and that is higher priority than gray catbird, for example. You'll also find the occurrence. We have likely or known records. So the likely records are modeled data. Here we have the habitat macro group, which is a general habitat type, and then specific habitat requirements for that species. So just to look at an example, the northern hardwood and conifer habitat, we'll look at the habitat information, which is also queried. And for example, here in this area of interest, we have primarily the northern hardwood and conifer macro group represented. So if this is your area of interest, you'd want to think about that kind of that primary habitat type when you're thinking about what work you might want to do for the species that are associated with it. We also include a habitat map. And here is where the rubber can meet the road. We have the conservation actions. So these are all defined in our species accounts of the Wildlife Action Plan. And we're collating that information for you within your area of interest. So for example, in this area of interest, we have several conservation actions that can be taken depending on what your resources are. And we also list what species might benefit from that action. Of course, we don't anticipate that you'll be able to institute all actions. Again, it's versatile for the user. So you can look down the list of things that would be helpful, and you can decide what you might be able to do. So just as an example, here we have these, they're all in these categories, conservation action categories. And we can, in this area of interest, clustering development would be helpful for wood thrush. Again, remembering that it's in that macro group that is the bulk of the area of interest. Also, invasive species control is also helpful for many species. So here's just a closer look at that. The text can be hard to read. So we have land use planning, water management, things that could be helpful for these species that are likely to be in that area of interest. You'd probably want to do a survey to ensure that those are present. These numbers at the end, those blue numbers, are actually references. So because this is a statewide plan, it's hard to drill down to the specificity needed to actually implement the action on the ground. So we always we highly recommend referencing contacting a wildlife professional who can help you to implement these actions specifically in your area of interest. This is what the references look like, and they're all hyperlinked. So for example, one that was referenced is the Pennsylvania Land Trust Association, and also the Planning Association, EPA, for buffers. And this is, again, just a closer look at what those references look like. We include them both as hyperlinks and written out this way in case you print out the area of interest report and would like to reference it in print form, you'd at least still have the URL available. And we also, after conservation actions, we also include research and survey needs for the known species of greatest conservation need in the area. We didn't show it, but field sparrow is actually known to occur in this area of interest. It was documented. You would have found conservation actions there for field sparrow. But here are just some research and survey needs that are helpful for the species. And, you might consider that if you wanted to do monitoring, for example. Lastly, we have contact information. So, you've received this report. You might need some help in figuring out how to interpret it. This will help you navigate to who you could call. So here we show which Game Commission and Fish and Boat Commission regions this area of interest are in. So you would know which regional office to contact. And then we have the Game Commission's wildlife diversity biologist contact information. If you don't know your regional wildlife diversity biologist, I encourage you to get to know them. They're a great resource. And their jobs are actually to help implement the wildlife action plan. So it's a free service, free technical assistance. It's available to anybody. It's available to landowners. They'll actually write landowner plans for larger lands that are at least 10 acres. Unless you're in the Southeast, then those lands are a little bit smaller. But here's the contact information for you right here at your fingertips. You can also, of course, send Diana or myself a message anytime through these email addresses. So, we hope this has inspired you to take action and get involved. You can use the Conservation Opportunity Area tool to help you. And again, that's available at wildlifeactionmap.pa.gov. Check out an area of interest, explore the tool and see, what you can find in places that you care about. You can also reference Chapter 4 of the State Wildlife Action Plan, which is available on both the Game Commission and Fish and Boat Commission websites. And we have a section called Take Action, Get Involved, where we try to identify several things that many people can take, from planting riparian buffers to helping with surveys, etc. And all skill levels can participate and help wildlife in Pennsylvania. For example, if you're into monarch butterflies, you can contribute that information to iNaturalist. There are several citizen science programs available and apps available to include to enter your data, such as birds for eBird, IMAP invasives, or the Pennsylvania Amphibian Reptile Survey. And we access all of this information for the Conservation Opportunity Area tool. So when you would submit a record to iNaturalist, for example, we'll actually find that information. We'll download those data and incorporate them into the Conservation Opportunity Area tool, and then it'll show up in the Area of Interest report. Now, again, the updates happen quarterly for threatened and endangered species and annually for everything else. So it won't be immediate. You won't see those data incorporated immediately, but they will show up. So we thank you for your attention. And if there's time, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
And thank you, Kathy and Diana. It was very informative.
There was one question that came in, but I believe you guys answered it already, from Bobby Hughes. Does the PA Game Commission have any models that place a recreational economic value on the return of wildlife to areas in reclaimed abandoned minelands, such as turkeys, elk, songbirds, or other species? Also, just for the attendees, if you want to, we do have a few minutes. You can raise your hand, and I can allow you to ask a question directly, or please use the session Q&A in Whova or the chat to ask questions. Go ahead, Kathy, or Diana, if you wanted to just rehash what you said to Bobby.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so specifically regarding abandoned minelands, we don't have any economic analysis specifically for that area, but there are several studies that are available nationally and even statewide for economic value of wildlife. So, you know, we can certainly point you in that direction if you'd like to kind of contact us separately, and we'd be happy to try to help, help find the information you're seeking if there's a specific need.
Thank you. Uh-oh, we lost our moderator. Where did she go? Oh, there she is. I'll let her back in. She ran away. Amy, you're back.
And again, thank you to all the participants who attended. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All righty. No more questions. Ooh, we had something pop up over here on the session Q&A. Oh, that's Bobby again. Just saying he'll follow up with you.
Great.
Good. Okay, well, we have to get going on to the next presentation. So thank you very much. Amy, do you have sound? Okay, I don't know. Something happened to Amy, but thank you very much. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next presentation. We'll see you there.
Great. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.